The Civil Rights Movement was a pivotal series of events in U.S. history that took place primarily during the 1950s and 1960s. It was a political, legal, and social movement aimed at ending racial segregation and discrimination against African Americans, particularly in the southern United States. The movement sought to secure equal rights under the law, including voting rights, the right to attend integrated schools, and the end of discriminatory practices in public accommodations and employment. 1. Historical background. The roots of the civil rights movement can be traced back to the post-Reconstruction era, late 19th century, when African Americans were subjected to systemic racism, segregation, disenfranchisement, and violence. However, the movement as we know it began to take shape in the mid-20th century. Key events and figures leading up to the movement include Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, the Supreme Court decision that upheld the separate but equal doctrine, which legalized racial segregation. Great Migration, 1910 to 1970, African Americans moved in large numbers from the rural South to urban areas in the North, leading to a shift in social and political dynamics. The rise of African American intellectuals, figures like W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and Langston Hughes laid the groundwork for a future demand for civil rights through their writings and activism. 2. The 1950s and 1960s, the height of the movement. The civil rights movement gained momentum after World War II, fueled by the economic, social, and political changes that followed the war. African Americans who had served in the military and worked in war industries were more determined to secure their civil rights upon their return. The movement included a combination of grassroots activism, legal challenges, and mass protests. Key events. Brown v. Board of Education, 1950, for the U.S. Supreme Court declared state laws establishing separate public schools for Black and white students to be unconstitutional. This landmark decision overturned the separate but equal doctrine from Plessy v. Ferguson. Montgomery bus boycott, 1955 to 1956, sparked by Rosa Parks' arrest for refusing to give up her seat to a white man on a segregated bus. The boycott became a national symbol of resistance to racial segregation. The emergence of Martin Luther King Jr. King became the leader of the movement after the success of the Montgomery bus boycott. He advocated for nonviolent civil disobedience inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. Sit-ins and freedom rides. In the early 1960s, young activists organized sit-ins at segregated lunch counters and freedom rides to challenge segregation in interstate bus travel. March on Washington, 1963, King delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, which became an iconic moment in the fight for racial equality. Civil Rights Act, 1960, for a landmark law passed by Congress that outlawed discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Voting Rights Act, 1965. This legislation aimed to eliminate racial discrimination in voting, particularly in southern states where Black Americans had been systematically disenfranchised. 3. Literature's role in the civil rights movement. Literature has played a crucial role in both reflecting and shaping the civil rights movement. Writers used literature to expose racial injustices, inspire activism, and articulate the collective struggles of African Americans. Key works and authors. Invisible Man, 1952, by Ralph Ellison. This novel explores the social and psychological consequences of racism. The protagonist's search for identity mirrors the struggles faced by African Americans during this period. The novel remains a powerful commentary on race and invisibility in American society. Go Tell It on the Mountain, 1953, by James Baldwin. Baldwin's semi-autobiographical novel delves into themes of racial identity, family, and religion in Harlem. His work often centered on the intersection of race, sexuality, and personal freedom. Native Son, 1940, by Richard Wright. Wright's novel focuses on the life of Bigger Thomas, a Black man who faces systemic poverty and racism in Chicago. The novel highlights the brutal effects of segregation and racial inequality. The Autobiography of Malcolm X, 1965, written by Malcolm X and journalist Alex Haley. This autobiography details the transformation of Malcolm X from a street hustler to a powerful advocate for Black rights. The book highlights the evolution of his ideas about race and his critique of both mainstream civil rights strategies and the larger American racial system. The Souls of Black Folk, 1903, by W.E.B. Du Bois. Though written before the Civil Rights Movement, Du Bois' seminal work introduced the concept of double consciousness and laid the intellectual groundwork for later movements, challenging the segregationist policies and offering a profound critique of American racial dynamics. Poetry. Poetry was also an important medium during the Civil Rights Movement. Writers like Langston Hughes, Gwendolyn Brooks, and Leroy Jones used poetry to express the pain, resilience, and hope of African Americans in the face of oppression. Hughes' poems, such as I, Too, and The Negro Speaks of Rivers, were powerful statements of Black identity and resistance. 4. The legacy and impact of the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement succeeded in dismantling legalized segregation and discrimination in the U.S., but the fight for racial equality is ongoing. The legislative victories, like the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, were significant steps forward, but systemic racism, economic disparities, and social inequality persist to this day. The literature produced during the Civil Rights Movement continues to resonate. Works that chronicled the experiences of Black Americans during this period remain integral to understanding the ongoing struggles for racial justice and equality. These works have helped future generations reflect on racial dynamics and continue the work of the movement.